But there was a soldier from Edmonton convicted earlier this year. She was convicted of 3 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of arson related to trying to kill her children in the PNQs in Edmonton in 2015. This was completely bungled by the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service, CFNIS. They tried to say the dad did it. He was deployed. I mean, a rock-solid alibi. They had more tracking of him deployed than they would have if he was still home. But it took 8 years from the fire to her conviction. And yet she was the person who did. She did it. She's been convicted.
She's been convicted.
So in my opinion, she's been convicted.
So that begs the question, why were they not trying to have her get convicted?
Well, if I told you at the time there was a huge push to have women in the armed forces, what would a headline of "A female soldier tries to kill her children" do?
Hey there, Hard to Kill listeners. Today's episode is brought to you by Natesto. Did you know that only 5% of men get treated for low testosterone? Low testosterone is a serious health concern that is rarely discussed, especially in the veteran community. Toxic exposure, mild traumatic brain injuries, and terrible sleep habits can all contribute to a rock bottom total T-score. I want to help improve the health and fitness of the veteran community, and that's why I've partnered with Natesto. Talk to your doctor today and see if Natesto is the right solution for you. Let me fill you in, folks. I've written a new book. It's called Harden the Up. The book is 19 chapters of the best actionable intel on how to get yourself fit, healthy, and moving in the right direction to make yourself harder to kill. Ebook and audiobook drop on the 28th of November. On the 29th, you can get your paperback copy at Amazon. Be one of the first to get your hands on a copy of this amazing book and become harder to kill. Peace. Good afternoon, folks. Sitting with our favorite guest, Catherine Christensen. And there's so much to talk about now right before the Christmas holidays because there's a lot of updates that are happening. Not to mention that our Canadian government is in the throes of a total collapse. There's also things going on with the CAF and lawsuits against them that Catherine will fill us in on. So, Catherine, I'm going to leave the floor to you to fill us in on a bunch of the updates for not only the what's the name again?
Valor.
It's all Valor, right? 0.0, 2.0, there's an appeal going on, judicial review that you just mentioned, ATIP issues. There's just a ton going on. So let's just start with where you think a lot of attention needs to go right now, and then we'll carry on the conversation.
Yeah, our year-end review. The CDS looked awfully nervous in the CAF Christmas card on X this morning. Maybe she's justified to look a little nervous these days. Anyway.
So this is I haven't checked X this morning. So This is a CAF Christmas card that is posted every year. What is that exactly?
Well, I didn't see Air ever do it, but it's a post with the CDS, the CWO, Blair, and his deputy minister. I think that's who the other woman is. Okay. And they're wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. And our CDS looks a little nervous in there. She doesn't look confident at all.
I would be shitting my pants if I was in her shoes. I'll be honest.
I want to be in the room when she meets the new Secretary of Defense from the U.S.
Assuming it's Hegseth, it's going to be an interesting dynamic with two polar opposites being in the same room.
Well, and she's the epitome of what he says he wants to get rid of in the military.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
So, anyway, I don't think I'll get an invitation, but that's one invitation I would like to do. Anyway, so let's start with the case. I can't reveal any names on this case because there are children who are a victim of crime, so they're protected. The names are protected, and it involves the parents. So obviously can't say the parents' names either. But there was a soldier from Edmonton convicted earlier this year. When her appeal failed, she was convicted of 3 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of arson related to trying to kill her children in the PNQs in Edmonton in 2015. This was completely bungled by the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service, CFNIS. The file. It's only when the dad came to me and we started a private investigation and ended up on the road to a private prosecution to bring her to account in the criminal court because there's no statute of limitations on attempted murder. We had got to the point where we had such a solid case that the Crown then took it over and then prosecuted her. But it took 8 years from the fire to her conviction. And she was sentenced to 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, so what you're bringing forward is, hey, Canadian Armed Forces, you shit the bed on this, and you need to be held responsible.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about the damage done to the dad and to the 3 kids. She miscalculated how much to sedate the oldest child. He was 9 at the time, and he woke up and got his siblings out of the fire. And there were medals given to other members of the forces in the queues who came and rescued those kids when they called for help. So, but then CFNIS didn't even, that happened in July, they didn't even question the mother till March. They tried to say the dad did it. He was deployed. I mean, a rock solid alibi. They had more tracking of him deployed than they would have if he was still home.
Okay,
anyway.
So hold on a sec here. So mom and dad are both serving in the cap. They have children. The mom is clearly suffering with something because she wants her kids dead. That's very troubling. And dad is deployed and she tries to murder her children. And somehow the military police bungled the investigation.
Yes.
How could, I mean, I don't have much faith in military police. I don't think many people do, but that seems like a pretty cut and dry, hey, this happened. Clearly dad's away. The main suspect is
and dad had just been granted full custody of those kids just before he deployed. They weren't supposed to be with her.
So then why weren't the military police able to actually conduct a thorough investigation?
And give here that the fire service at CFB Edmonton, their report said it was arson. And her insurance company did a full report with the dogs brought in for accelerants, said it was a deliberate arson. So then they tried to say it was a 9-year-old child.
They tried to set the place on fire?
They were doing everything possible not to investigate her and convict her. And yet she was the person who did. She did it. She's been convicted.
She's been convicted.
So in my opinion, she's been convicted.
So that begs the question, why were they not trying to have her get convicted?
Well, if I told you at the time there was a huge push to have women in the armed forces, what would a headline of a female soldier tries to kill her children do? Right, as they're trying to get more women in. Yeah.
But what's a worse headline?
Yeah.
Soldier, because she's a soldier, tries to kill her children. That's just a terrible story. Or massive cover-up by Canadian Armed Forces police to what's worse, put it on a scale. They
did everything to gaslight this dad. He ended up calling a short timeout on his career because he couldn't believe what the forces were doing to him and ignoring this. And so we've pushed them. We honestly pushed them into having to do something about it. So we brought the lawsuit after her conviction because we had to prove she was actually guilty. Otherwise, it's not a negligent investigation. So we brought the lawsuit. The Crown has now responded. They want a motion to dismiss, standard operating procedure. But their reason for motion to dismiss is that the Canadian Armed Forces Police Service has no duty of care to families living in military housing, not even in the face of severe domestic violence. That's the Crown's position. Policy, though, that says that they are very much involved in domestic violence in the queues.
Okay.
So I don't know where the Crown hasn't read the policy or what.
But what does that term mean, duty of care? Like if the military police has a duty of care towards the soldiers on base, what does that essentially mean?
It essentially means that they're required to act for the safety or security of military members, but also military families living in their jurisdiction, which the PMQs are in the jurisdiction of the military police, right? So, I mean, because the dad even went to the RCMP, he went to Edmonton Police saying, can you help me? And they're like, we don't have jurisdiction.
Whoa. Okay, so
basically their defense is we owe nothing. We weren't obligated to investigate. We weren't obligated to look out for the safety of these children. Because keep in mind, she's walking around in uniform, kept serving.
Yeah. So then, because I'm assuming police officers, city police, RCMP, they have a duty of care because their job is to ensure that people don't get hurt.
They actually don't.
Well, they don't have a duty of care?
Not legally. In Canada, that's the way the case law works. Very rarely do they owe a duty of care to a victim of a crime, which should shock a lot of people, because I would have thought that if I pick up the phone and call 911, that they have an obligation to at least try to help me.
Okay, so then
So the difference with the CAF, though, with CAF police, is that there's actually written policy that says they have to look after military families in domestic violence situations.
Interesting. Is that in the National Defense Act, or is that?
That's in their, not QRNOs, the DOADs.
DOADs, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting because, I mean, from what I understood, we have the RCRs never pass a fault, but I don't know if it's DOADs or KRNOs, but if you see something that is wrong, you have a duty to report. So is that along the same lines where you can't let somebody go out and clearly break a rule or a military order, and if you don't report it, now you're just as guilty as the individual that did the thing? Right. But is that kind of along the same lines of a duty of care?
It's kind of along the same line. Duty of care, I can give you an example for the medical field, because I was an RN. So when a patient came into my unit and I was assigned to look after them, I had a duty of care to them to be trained in what I was doing, to know what I was doing, and to put their interests as my priority. I had to look after that patient to the best of my ability and my training and what was available to me at the time, including, do I need to call in help, etc. Did I call the doctor on time, etc. So that's duty of care, where when you've come into contact with someone that should be responsible for whatever assistance you're asking for. Right? So, yeah, I was kind of shocked they went that route, but they did.
So essentially, the Crown is saying, well, no other police force has a duty of care, so therefore the MPs don't have a duty of care in the CAF.
They have no obligation to protect children in the queues who are exposed to domestic violence.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so I find that shocking, because if there's one spot where, there's very clear jurisdiction, there's very clear obligations by policy, written policy of the CAF, to look after families that are living on their property.
Right. And it does seem, just at face value, right, that the military's responsibility is to make sure that morale is also ensured. Right. And having a murder of 3 children on your base is probably not a good thing for morale.
No.
Just throwing that
Even
out
the
there.
Attempted murder caused. And then nothing happening to her.
Wow. Yeah.
For years.
That's awful.
Yeah. Kudos to the dad for not giving up. And then he happened to reach out to me, and I had a really strong team that said, hey, wait a minute, let's try something different here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So that being said, that's like another layer of, can we label that corruption, or is that just poor leadership?
Leadership.
Just poor leadership.
Okay. Yeah. This shouldn't even be a question.
Mm-hmm.
When this dad brought this lawsuit to say, you shit the bed and you put my 3 children at risk, that my children could have died, because she didn't give up. She kept trying to get to those kids. And I would be in court stopping her from getting to those kids. We had a psych report done that shows she was a psychopath. So,
pure hell. That's pure hell.
Yeah, where I'm watching her still in uniform. She didn't deserve to be in that uniform.
So wait, after the conviction, she's not in uniform anymore.
No, she was ready for this. They tried to medically release her just before her appeal, but she ended up being released under the bad actor release category. But yeah, she tried for a medical release.
Wow, that would have been a big slap in the face. Like, no, you get a medical release, even though the folks that desperately wanted one from the vaccine mandates couldn't get one. Like, that would have been a bigger slap in the face too. It
might have been that when that came to my attention, I kind of raised a little bit of hell there. It's like, no. She's right up, in my mind, she's right up there with Russell Williams.
Insane. I haven't seen anything in the papers about this, but this must have made the media at some point.
Yeah, it was big locally. Okay. I know Global, CTV, CBC, they all covered it because it's juicy stuff.
Yeah,
But
indeed. Yeah.
so the CAF is fighting this lawsuit. This dad is still fighting almost 10 years later.
That's unreal.
And his kids. And of course, he's not eligible for social or mental health supports because VAC says it's not service related.
Oh, that's another wrinkle.
And
Wait.
his kids are suffering from all the effects, as you can imagine, all the effects, all the gaslighting.
So they're saying that even though he was in uniform, employed by the CAF, his kids lived on base, everything happened while serving. The struggles he's having are not service related because it wasn't due to bullets and bombs. But that doesn't make any sense because
And no supports for his kids either.
Yeah, I know people that weren't deployed that are like traumatized from things that happened during training. Like, how's that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But so this is why we brought the lawsuit, is to get, first of all, compensate these kids and get them the supports they need.
Of course. Yeah, of course. And is a precedent for that? Like, can children of parents get benefits for psychological assistance and stuff
So how VAC works, if you have a member's got PTSD that's been covered, their children and their significant others can be covered because it helps the mental health of the veteran if they're also supported. That's the catchphrase. That's how they do it.
Gotcha. But for whatever reason, because they can't admit that dad has post-traumatic stress due to all this, the kids won't get any support. Okay. Wow, that's dirty.
We've talked about all this dirty play before, so
It's really dirty. Speaking about dirty, the lawsuit, Valor.
Yes.
What's going on there?
After I got beat up in court that day?
Yeah.
If I had known the background of the justice that day, associate justice that day, I probably would have asked her to recuse herself.
Well, you were being overly vexatious, Catherine.
Yeah, I know. And, malicious, I think, was a conspiracy theorist.
Conspiratorial, yeah.
Yeah, I was using the wrong language.
Right.
Right, because I called it gene therapy, which is now an accepted term in the scientific community.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, when I first got the decision, I was like, there's nothing to appeal. But then we dug into it deeper. I had other lawyers reach out to me with their opinions. I had Brian Peckford reach out to me with his take on it. And we did.
But he just wrote a nice article about it.
Yeah, because I had sent him my filed materials and stuff for him to see.
I like, you know what? On a side note, I'm glad that I said, I think this sounds like a constitutional crisis. And then the dude that's still left that actually wrote or helped write the charter was saying this is a constitutional crisis. I'm like, oh, I like it when I'm on the ball like that. That's good.
Me too.
Wow.
So anyway, so we found grounds for appeal because you don't get an appeal because you don't like the decision. You have to find that the judge made an error in fact or law or both.
Mm-hmm.
We found both. So we are now in the process of requesting that appeal and getting that going because what is it? Two of the plaintiffs out of the 330 have decided to proceed with the appeal.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the overwhelming majority have said, let's go.
What happens when you box Canadian troops into a corner and tell them they're done? They regroup and they come back out fighting.
Start shanking people.
So we're in that process now.
Mm-hmm.
People are fundraising for that because that's an additional expense, that we're already at the appeal phase and we're at the motion to dismiss and we're already appealing. But it's quite evident because the decision was almost identical to the decision she made with the postal workers.
Yeah, right.
So it was quite evident we were never going to win.
Mm-hmm.
It explains some of the shock on her face from some of the things I said, because that was going to make her task just a little bit harder to turn us down. Yeah.
Well, so the thing that you said on our last conversation about the lawsuit, right? Like you had something like 6,000 pages of evidence
that we submitted for that.
That you submitted, right? And that covers everybody's claim. So there's 330 people because the statement of claim doesn't have all of that. It's just it's like a synopsis, right? It's like an executive summary of everybody's claim. So you can read that and be like, oh, okay, I get an idea. But every one of those summaries has a few pages of evidence, right? 330, that's like 20 pages of evidence per person, roughly. So therefore, like you said, like after 2 months, you had already come to a decision, which seems awfully fast.
It was really fast. I've done judicial reviews for things not related to this.
Mm-hmm.
that is one person. It's maybe 80 pages, and it's taken 8 months to get a decision.
What? Wow. Yeah.
So
that doesn't make much sense. But by the education that you've given me on like a mass tort and how these work, each one of these individuals, she found zero evidence for the claim to move forward. Like theoretically, 220 or 329 of them could be dismissed, but one of them's like, I got to hear this one, right? Like that could have theoretically happened.
And here's the thing: on a motion to dismiss, the justice is required to assume that everything said in the statement of claim is true. Because at that point, you're not assessing the truth of the evidence. That's for trial. So she was saying that we
lied. Yeah. Which
but
it sounds
the legal
dirty.
requirement is for her to assume that everything I said in that statement of claim was true. Because after the hearing, I did sit down and reread my statement of claim. And I thought, and I wasn't the only one that read that before it was filed. I certainly asked colleagues for their opinions, etc. So it wasn't that I went off the rails and filed something that, Yeah. So anyway, we'll see what happens.
I find it just so hard to, like, there, not one of these has any merit. They're all vexatious. There's
the Military Agreements Committee. The Military Agreements Committee said that there were charter violations.
Yeah.
Their lawyers found charter violations, and she wouldn't even do charter violations for us to continue.
Yeah, I mean that seems so. I mean, obviously,
I'm not allowed to say it, Dave.
You're not. I'm like, that sounds like corruption to me. I mean, what do I know? But that really doesn't sound like the way a judicial system works in a democratic country. It doesn't sound right. And if you go into the background, like you said, of the justice, things don't add up.
Yeah, and releasing it near Remembrance Day and making it so you'd have to do an appeal, decide on an appeal at Christmas time.
Yeah, like I'm realizing that nothing's a coincidence. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh well, yeah, we just did it, whatever. We just did it on this day. It's no big deal. Oh, and just happens to be around Christmas time. You have to do the. No. That these are all very smart people that do very smart things. They're not dum-dums, so they know what they're doing and they do it with intention. So therefore, this is set up to make it harder, clearly. Because the once you pull on this string, and I can see what's going on in other countries. I can see what's going on in the States. This whole COVID debacle is now the strings are being pulled, and it's getting exposed for what it is, which was a massive fraud. And I'm pretty sure YouTube now is cool with me saying that. Pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, 2-3 years ago, no. Right. But I mean, this is what we were screaming into our screens about. Like, this is not right. This is a fraud. We can't let this go on. And for the reason that we're talking now, this is going to cost us more than just dollars and cents. It costs the trust of the members that were in the CAF, the long-term trust of anybody that wants to have their kids join, like the damage that it's done. So I think Canada's one of the last holdouts that's kind of circling the wagons and hoping that, oh, God forbid this all gets out and like we expose all this, because then we're all on the hook. And by all, I mean the people at the top that enforce this.
They've gone so far as to even not cover vaccine injured veterans with VAC. They're not going to cover them. I'm going to have to bring a lawsuit for that.
That's not Op Valor 2.0, right?
No, that's Op Safe and Effective.
Right, that's Op Safe and Effective.
My sarcasm there.
Right.
But
so has that been tabled yet? Has that been filed yet?
They have to go through the whole VAC process. And so I've got a few people that are going through the VAC appeal piece. Mm-hmm. And if they don't win there, we're ready to go.
What you're posting on X is heartbreaking. The stories from the individuals that are part of
that's
Valor.
1.0, 2.0, Safe and Effective.
Yeah.
That's whoever wants to tell their story. I said, okay, let's move it into the court of public opinion. Let's tell people what's going on here.
Yeah, like, I've shared, Facebook is kind of, that's where my parents and my aunts and uncles, where I get, like, I'm not siloed so much there in the veteran world. So I like reposting some of those on just my general profile. Be like, hey, just read this because you're not going to get it in the news. This is a Canadian who served their country, and this is the treatment that they received because they made a decision about their own body and their own health. And overwhelmingly, it's like, yeah, this is terrible. Yeah, I know it's terrible. So like, there needs to be something done about it. Well, what's being done? Well, they're having their lawsuits thrown out. People, they're supposed to. Well,
so
why?
For the court to say, well, suck it up. Too bad. Basically, what that justice said in her decision is that Canadian Armed Forces members have no rights. Right? I still disagree. Vehemently disagree with that.
Yeah, well, they don't have any rights in the sense that also they can't access timely justice or justice at all. Because if the argument is like, well, you have a grievance system, go through the grievance system. It's like, well, no, the reason why we're here is because we can't go through the grievance system because they're not going to hear this and there's no damages that can be awarded. So this doesn't make any sense.
There's grievances that are 18 years old waiting for a decision on the chief of defense staff's desk. The average is 5 years.
That's so crazy.
Now, speaking of grievances, so in that hearing, the Crown put in a decision from AIR on his mandate from someone who had grieved it. This is one of her errors. She made the assumption that that was one of the plaintiffs. It was not one of the plaintiffs. And so after that hearing, guess who tracked me down? The person whose decision was used in the Crown's materials. And so we are now bringing a judicial review of AIR's decision because AIR says that he didn't violate any charter rights, etc. Even though the Military External Review Committee said he did, and he doesn't have the authority to decide on constitutional questions.
Okay, wait, go over this again. I think I missed something here. So there was an individual that had a grievance in the CAF that put it on AIR's desk while AIR was still CDS.
Yes.
About the vaccine mandate.
Yes.
About being kicked out of the forces or abuse of power.
He actually took the vaccine, but he still grieved the mandate.
Got you. Okay, and then the justice. So we're talking about Justice McLaughlin.
Yeah. So when the Crown filed their materials for this motion to dismiss, one of their exhibits was this decision from AIR made just in time to put into this document.
Okay.
And it was basically so that they could stand up and say, look, the grievance system works. Look, here's a decision.
And the decision was, get out of here. You don't have anything.
I did nothing wrong.
I did nothing. Oh, but this individual was not part of your 330.
No.
So they were using evidence from just like randomly grabbing somebody's grievance process and saying,
and the justice in her decision says that this proof that the grievance system works because one of the plaintiffs has received a decision.
Oh, so
that's an error of fact.
She made an error of fact, like big time.
Yeah.
That's really
so. Then in the meantime, the person whose grievance it was connected with me.
It's like, hey, I guess I'm part of a lawsuit now. Okay.
So we've brought a judicial review. They gave him, they served him with that decision from AIR 2 days before this guy deployed to the Middle East. So that they were trying to stop him from grieving or from bringing a judicial review.
Right.
But because I'm so used to dealing with military members, I don't care if you're deployed, I can do this. So we have brought that and we are now put in materials. We're now going to be getting a hearing for a judicial review of that. So it's going to be a race to see whether we get a judicial review or an appeal first.
You need to start selling a lot more hats, Catherine. Let's just put it that way.
I'd love to. I love those hats. I almost wore it today just for you, Dave.
Oh man! Well, next time we get on, we'll both wear them together.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll melt the internet down.
I couldn't resist when somebody said that phrase to me. One of my clients said that phrase to me, and I'm using that.
Yeah. No, that's good.
For your listeners, they are caps that say "Make CAF Warriors Again." Yes. Red caps with the white writing.
Yeah, that's the trigger factory right there for people that can't take red hats with white lettering on them.
Yeah. So then to follow up on that, so then there's 2.0, which is basically the same case as 1.0. So I went to 2.0, said, okay, we've had this decision. The Crown said that they had 10 days to decide, and if they wanted to withdraw their lawsuit, there'd be no costs, blah, blah, blah. So I go to that group of clients and say, what would you like to do? And I think 3 said, I'm done. And the rest have said, in the typical Canadian warrior fashion, go for it.
Let's go.
We've learned from 1.0. We're going to use a different approach. So 2.0 is still proceeding as well, much to the chagrin of the Crown lawyer.
I can imagine.
Because he's the same guy.
Isn't he retiring too? Isn't it
well, he's getting to retirement age. So he is assigned to 1.0, 2.0. He's got the judicial review I just talked about. He's kind of overseeing that one with the kids, but a junior colleague is actually in contact with me.
Does the Crown not have enough lawyers?
No, they're always advertising.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Edmonton's not too happy with me because it was a quiet little backwater, and I've kind of blown that out of the water.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Well, I mean, is it safe to say that because we're not as litigious here in Canada, that when big things like this come about, we're just not prepared? Like, we don't have the justices, we don't have the Crown lawyers, we don't have the
clerks hate me.
Yeah, because they don't I don't recall a time. I mean, granted, I haven't really been in up until a few years ago. I didn't pay attention to any of this stuff. But now it just seems like there's just lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, because there was a huge miscarriage of justice over the last 4 years. We've never seen. I don't think there's any precedent for this, right?
Well, and it's switched a mindset in Canadians' minds that people became so desperate that they finally realized that we have courts.
Right.
And the other factor is that the handful of lawyers in Canada who are willing to take all this stuff on outside the CAF and in the CAF, there's only a handful of us.
Mm-hmm.
We started turning to our American colleagues.
Yeah.
Holding their government to account for 200 more years than we have.
Yeah.
So our laws are different, but the tactics and the strategy work because we're both based on British common law.
Right.
Systems.
Right.
So, yeah. So I will quote my opposing counsel on these cases. He has said to me, "I don't know what to do with you, Miss Christensen." I should get a T-shirt that says that.
That's that. Yeah.
I'm quite proud of that. I'm happy with that. So I'm sure he was not happy when he got that notice that we were appealing.
So in terms of the actual judiciary, right? I get the impression that because you mentioned this on our last conversation, we don't get to vote at any level for any justice, right? Like, it's all nominated.
Yes. So
it's all internal nominations, or is it all prime ministerial nominations? Like, at what level do people get nominated by? Does the prime minister nominate people? I don't know how this system works at all, and I think folks kind of want to get more visibility on how's our judicial system work, because I don't know.
So for provincial level courts, they're appointed by the premier of the province. But when we get into federal level courts, which in Alberta is the King's Bench, some provinces call it their Superior Court, etc. From that up through the Supreme Court of Canada and all of the federal court of appeal justices, they are all appointed by the federal government, the Attorney General, the Privy Council, so they get nominated. After 10 years of being a lawyer, you can apply to become a justice.
Okay.
At whatever level.
Okay.
A lot of it, unfortunately, is if you're politically savvy enough to get the support, then you can be nominated.
So let's say for the Supreme Court, right? There's 13?
9.
11? 9. Okay. That's how much I know about our government. When they get nominated, because you have that job in perpetuity until you die, right? Unless you step down.
No, in Canada, you have to retire at 75.
Okay.
Any level of the bench, you're required to retire at 75. Some do stay on as kind of part-time justices to help with the workload, but you have to retire as a full-fledged justice at any level at 75.
But we don't have the same type of scrutiny like the Americans do when they nominate somebody. Like, they don't have to go through Congress, right? Like in the States, they don't have to go through Parliament and get grilled on their entire life history to make sure that nomination is approved or whatever, right?
Right. We don't have a judiciary committee that vets them or anything.
Well, that doesn't seem right.
That's our system.
That doesn't seem we're based off the British system, so the British do the same thing, I imagine, yes. Right? Okay. So, all right. So I was literally having a conversation with a friend of mine about republics. And he was like, Canada's not based on anything. I'm like, oh my God, I think the same way too. But we don't really have anything backing us up except for like the king and the governor general, but they're not going to do anything. The governor general, I don't think is going to step in and dissolve parliament right now.
Well, she had the perfect opportunity on
I'm
Monday.
pretty
and she
sure
didn't do it.
she should have. Who has confidence in the government? It's like that. Okay, well, oh shit. It's like, she's probably like, crap, I got to go to work. I got to do something like for real. I didn't think this was going to happen. But that's entirely what her role is. The governor general is supposed to be like, yeah, the Canadians and the House of Commons don't have confidence in the cabinet, and therefore the government needs to be dissolved. I mean, that's my interpretation, but I don't think I'm crazy to think that. Like, all of this just seems like it's all part of the same issue. Like we don't quite know how to reconcile our old rules with the modern era. And we have a lot of shit going on now because everything's accelerating, because people now understand, hey, I can go get a lawyer. Hey, I can go sue people. Like, yeah, I'm not standing for this anymore.
Well, and the cracks and weaknesses in our system have now been exposed to a large number of people. Anything that's happening right now in the legal system, I haven't been shocked yet, because I've seen it for 10 years now. So when Keith Wilson was being interviewed by Viva Fry during the convoy, and he pointed out that this was going to expose our legal system for good or bad.
Yeah, it was Gad Sad. He wrote something on Twitter. And he's like, this is awful. We've had to endure this for so long. But, my response, I've got I don't think you can see it in the shot, but, I read the Stoic philosophers that in order to improve, we had to go through this because the cracks need to be broken open because we have to improve. So this was a necessary evil because I think, to move forward and mature, you have to go through some turmoil. We haven't really had much turmoil, but the last 8-9 years have been pretty rough. Thank God we haven't had a war here. That's in my opinion, that's the last worst thing that can happen. We've gotten, to the point where in any other country, I think we'd be in full revolt. Like if this was France, like you really think this would be going on in the government right now and there'd be no revolts?
The farmers would be spraying the Parliament building.
They'd be spraying, yeah. Like we'd be spraying maple syrup all everything right now. Like I'm just surprised that we've had such restraint, to be honest. That
and this is my opinion, when the convoy happened, there was a real resurgence of Canadians realized that the ordinary people had power.
Yes.
And that's why the government came down on people so hard at the convoy and took away, made it personal by taking away your ability to pay your mortgage, take away your credit cards so you couldn't buy gas to get home, because they wanted people to get the message, you are not allowed to do this. We will not allow you to protest anything that we're doing. Because nothing they did was illegal. And we should be allowed to protest on the steps of Parliament to say we don't agree with what the government is doing right now. And that's why they were so harsh, because they wanted to scare people into not doing it again.
100%. Yeah. Absolutely right. Yeah, they brought out all the artillery right off the bat. There was no negotiation. It was just, we're going to mess you up on every plane possible. Financial, economic, social, you name it, judicially. They just smashed, right? And
they had the planes up listening to everybody's cell phones, tracking everything that was being discussed.
Right.
So if they couldn't get you on the financial, etc., they had other stuff they could probably catch you on.
100%. Pretty sure that's why my Facebook ads account wasn't working for 2 years. I'm gonna throw that out there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I was there, and I'm pretty sure I got pinged. And like, yeah, who's this? Yeah, this up and comer. Now let's crush this guy right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was insane to see, but now like things are coming out on the launch, and it just seems like they're also not very good at covering their tracks. No. So it's also
they're not very experienced at what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, it's like you have like a cat burglar just getting started, and they don't know what they're doing. They're leaving the windows open. They're leaving footprints, and like they're just like all over the place. And it just takes a discerning eye. What Hans, like you can't Like, you can't do that. You're clearly breaking the rules here. Like, what's going on? Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Response.
Yeah. Now, speaking of that, let's talk about the ATIPs and the Information Commissioner.
Of course, yeah, because that's great because I said Brian on talking about the spy plane we're just talking about, and like his ATIPs are just not showing up, and now you've got an issue as well with the ATIP process. So yeah, let's get into that.
So the Information Commissioner is bringing a court case against DND and CAF. It's going to be aired by the federal court on January 7th. If people want to tune in, you have to register. If you want to register for that and watch it, by all means. And several of our ATIPs are coming back. Some are saying that there's former employees and they don't keep those records. Not true. Or that there's no records to return. Here's the good one. I just got it day before yesterday, Dave. You're going to love this one, especially as a former member. We did an ATIP wanting all of the information, emails, etc., related to making why COVID vaccine was a bona fide operational requirement. Okay? That's been the basis of this whole thing from CAF, operational requirement. That's why there's still a mandate today.
Yes.
COVID vaccine is a bona fide operational requirement. So we put in an ATIP for it. Guess what we got back?
There's nothing.
There's no records.
So does that mean there is actually no records, or there are records and they just don't want to?
It means I can interpret that to say there is no bona fide operational requirement, and the whole reasoning behind it now false. They can't prove me wrong because they have no records, apparently.
Wow.
I dare them. I'm telling them, you had no real operational requirement for the COVID vaccine. And if I'm wrong, show me. Give me the documents.
Right. Yeah. So you box them into a corner. Okay. So I remember, we read the briefing note. Surgeon General was like, hey, don't go through with this because it would likely infringe on some rights. And we've already got an issue with mefloquine. We've already got good coverage. So let's just leave this. One of the options was as an operational requirement. So I'm just pushing back as like devil's advocate. The Surgeon General, I know because I have it here. I could pull it up if I wanted to. Hey, maybe we just leave this as like a requirement as part of the vaccine schedule to deploy, but won't have any effect on your long-term career because this happens kind of all the time kind of thing. Like, it's just, I don't want to get the shots. Like, I guess you're not the point. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. But there wasn't any further justification other than that in that briefing note. So even that, isn't that part of like a bona fide like reason? Shouldn't that have been in your response?
Yeah.
But I have that. You have that. Like, we all have that document. So like they're clearly lying, because I would say like that is part of like the reasoning behind the bona fide reason that it has to be administered, right?
I would say that should have been one of the reasons for the CDS to bring in a mandate.
Wow, I can't believe they have the balls to say there's no evidence or there's no records.
That's kind of what we've been up against. But now they've really they've boxed themselves into a corner.
Like, they could have submitted anything.
They could have sent me 500 redacted emails.
Yeah.
But they said,
like,
no,
I mean,
if I was
on their side, that's what I would have done. I'd be like, oh, she wants? Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's start, get the printers going, and let's just redact a shit ton of stuff that's related to it. And then be like, there you go. And then you'd be like, oh, I guess I got to read all this.
And now their latest tactic is that whenever documents are asked for, they don't give them. Then the Information or Privacy Commissioner says, according to legislation, this is a legitimate thing. You have to give them these documents. Here's the order, because they can do that. They can order them to give it. The CAF is responding now with, well, we want a judicial review of that decision. So it's a delay tactic.
Well, that
your tax dollars at work, by the way, because this is two government agencies fighting each other.
Yeah. So who gets fired, right? Like who ultimately for CAF ATIPs who's the buck stop with? Is the CDS?
It all rolls uphill.
But then
the Minister of National Defense and the CDS.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm pretty sure they're not reading every ATIP, right? There's a whole organization department.
But the person at the top is responsible for the actions of the people below.
Right. So you'd be like, hey, get this sorted because we're breaking the law.
Now, keep in mind, they've had this issue since the Admiral Norman stuff.
Well, what happened there?
Well, because when he was going to trial, his lawyer asked for all of his records. They wanted his emails, etc., to defend him. And it came back that they had no records.
They said they had no records?
They said they had no records. And
for
he was like,
admiral?
I know I wrote those emails, etc. So then a whistleblower came forward and said what they had done is they had put a code name on all of his stuff. So if you searched for Mark Norman, you got nothing. But if you searched for the code word, it all came up. So then that whistleblower came and testified. And then Vance testified for half a day. And then the charges were dropped and he made a settlement.
Wow, that's dirty pool.
Mm-hmm. And they're still doing it.
Yeah, that whole ATIP system, it seems super broken, super broken. So it's the commission, the information commissioner. Like how much do they have?
Well, they have the ability to order without going to court. They have the power to order a government agency or department to give the people what they want.
And let's hypothetically say the CAF says, yeah, there's no documents. Oh yeah, let's go to judicial review, and then they just keep on dragging their heels. What ultimately happens? Like, couldn't the CAF just be completely arrogant and just say,
sure, Stonewall,
and Stonewall and be like, we're never giving you anything that you want. What are you going to do about it? Couldn't they just do that?
So here's where they were starting to run into trouble with that, though, is that you've got lawyers like me sitting out here that says, okay, well, if you want to play that game, I'm going to make what's called a negative inference based on what you're doing. So it's going to go against you to start hiding all this stuff, just to stonewall all this stuff. We're going to start using that as a tactic against you. So it's not the win they think it is. The other problem they've got is they don't have enough clerks in the CAF to pull all these documents.
Oh, I would hate to be a clerk that has to do this job.
They're bitching.
I would hate it.
I have connections everywhere. They are not happy. I mean, we're over 1 million pages.
Wow.
In documents now.
So, like, you aside, I know 2 other folks that just like pump them out. Yeah. Just like pump. It's like a cottage industry at this point.
I have an ATIP committee.
So I mean, like,
and keep in mind, I've got more than just one lawsuit going on. They're ATIPing for lots of stuff.
But I mean, with the government knows that this legislation is on the books, and any communication at the government level is our information. Like, we paid for it, so that's the reasoning, right? Like, this didn't come from nowhere. Like, the Americans, they did theirs. Pretty much every Western country has this ability to ask for the information.
We've got a government that ran on transparency, remember?
Yeah, which is horseshit. But I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody really doesn't want to do it, like you said, like negative inference, right? But I guess the larger consequences, you do it so long, so often that everybody loses trust in the institutions, and you either have a revolt or a referendum or like a change of government until it gets fixed. I'm just thinking like really big picture, like it just seems like you're not going to fix this in the CAF anyways.
Right. The Canadians need to get really vocal, especially we're coming into an election. 2025, at some point, we're going to get an election. We need to be really, really vocal to the future government. You need to fix this. For example, look to the people to the south. They're saying to the Trump government, okay, we elected you to fix this. And you know what's going to happen if they don't start fixing things from day one. All hell will break loose. And I think Canadians need to step up and start getting involved in their government and start pushing. Start pushing. I mean, yesterday on using X alone, they got a huge bill, what they call a pork bill in the United States. They got it like trashed. It was not brought in. And normally that would have been a rubber stamp and now off they go for Christmas.
Interesting.
So the word got out publicly and it went viral basically. Mm-hmm. And people started calling their members, their representatives and saying, do not pass this or you're not getting reelected in 2 years.
So it works.
It worked. It worked because it's hidden in that bill. Like somebody printed it. It was like a stack this big, this bill. And deep inside of there were things like a $70,000 raise for each congressperson. There was that you couldn't bring a lawsuit for the COVID stuff in there.
Of course.
There were all kinds of things. And it was supposed to be a budget bill, but they'd hidden a whole bunch of stuff in there. And the American public raised hell yesterday, and it was defeated when it came up for a vote.
Yeah, I've seen rumblings on X about when we used to having the trucker convoy 2.0. I'm like, yeah, I mean, like at this rate, I'd be surprised if there isn't something in January, just because of the nature of the way things are going on. Like people are genuinely pissed.
Well, and this morning I saw some talk about a referendum, but guess what? The referendum
has to be called by JT.
Has to be called by the Prime Minister. Yeah,
he's not going to do that. And didn't he just recently change the rules too? Like, because I thought the party, the Liberal Party, could just say, "Hey, dude, we had a vote, you're out," because nobody voted. We don't vote for the Prime Minister; we vote for the party. But apparently, he changed the rules in his own party that he has to call the leadership.
Yes, a narcissistic psychopath will do things like that. Whoa. While they're still really popular. While he was the golden boy, he protected himself.
Wow, that's how like Mugabe runs stuff.
Yep.
If you want, you guys can totally vote me out. We're a democracy, but I'm the one that needs to initiate it. That's the only thing. But we're cool though, right? That's all right.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah, you could bring a referendum. If I say so.
Yeah, if I deem it to be worthy of the cause. Yeah, we're really, really struggling. I mean, the only good thing is I love us as a people, and we got a lot of good things to look forward to. We have everything here. It's the most frustrating thing is, how do you screw this up?
We were the number one place to live in the world not long ago.
How do you screw it up? We have everything.
Yeah.
You know, like we've got the resources out the ass. We've got, in my opinion, a great culture when it's like unified.
A very educated population.
Like we got everything. But no, I never thought one person or one government could really do that much damage, because I didn't really believe they had that much power. But hey, these 9 years have really proven me wrong.
I grew up in Trudeau 1.0 era, in Alberta, so I know how much damage one government.
Yeah, totally different perspective. Person. Totally different perspective than from me growing up, where Trudeau 1.0 was like, he was revered. He was like, yeah, because the FLQ thing, right? Like he stomped out the separatists. So, you know, my parents are like, love that family,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
So two totally different perspectives in different parts of the country.
And actually, he absolutely destroyed or tried to destroy Alberta. The only thing that saved us was Lougheed was our premier.
Mm-hmm.
And Trudeau, the elder, was very upset because Lougheed was a better lawyer than he was and protected Alberta.
Yeah, I mean, that was even before I was born, but you know, long memories are important. And I was just talking to a friend of mine. He's like, hey man, he's like, you know that there's going to be Trudeau 3.0 coming up. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, his son. Like, give it 10 years, right? And it'll be a rebrand, and it'll be like, oh my God, yeah, we need to have a third Trudeau in here because the last two were amazing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's not going to happen. He's like, dude, let's put money on it. I was like, oh wow. I'm like,
we elected a part-time drama teacher, trust fund kid.
Man, you know,
for 9 years.
When I originally heard those, you know, those slights, I was like, there's nothing wrong with teachers. I'm a teacher. You can be a teacher and be prime minister. That's the point of our system. But now I realize, and yeah, if I had after my first like teaching contract, just been thrown into politics and then expected to be prime minister, that would have been a bad decision for the country. I wouldn't have been comfortable with it. You know, like who am I to be prime minister after teaching for a few years?
And let's be honest, a drama teacher is not a math, science, history, sociology teacher.
Catherine,
right?
I don't want to piss off my teacher ex-colleagues, but yeah, I'd have to agree it's not as robust. There was definitely like, hey, you guys get paid the same as us kind of mentality. It's like, all right, like you can show up half in the bag and like, oh, go act out the last bit of your play. Whereas like I'm on the board sweating. Exactly. I'm like,
there are lots of every profession has that.
Yeah, of course.
That bit, you know,
it's like infantry and Air Force, and Air Force, right?
When I was a nurse, there were, you know, we used to say the hospital nurses used to say the same thing about the community health nurses.
Yeah.
You know, it happens in everyone, but just his work history he was completely unqualified.
Yeah, completely. And this is what we get. So, Catherine, before we wrap up, what do you want to? The last thing you want to share, and like final thoughts before we wrap up for the Christmas season.
Final thoughts. It's been a hell of a year, and
It's been wild.
I think we're headed into an even wilder year in 2025.
Really?
Stay tuned. I think there's going to be a lot of shifts. I am very interested to see how the incoming government is going to handle all of the scandal and lawsuits, etc., that are coming at them just from the CAF side alone, let alone all the other stuff. I'm interested to see if they want it to go away quietly, or if they're going to, because they're saying they want to bring back the warrior culture in the CAF.
Yes.
Well, one way of doing it would be to clear the deck of all the negative stuff. That includes lawsuits as a negative, and do a reboot of the whole thing. So I'm interested to see how serious they actually are. Are they just electioneering?
Me too.
Time will tell.
Yeah, it'll be a really interesting. Yeah, you're right. And that's, further to the end of 2025, assuming nothing in terms of an election gets kicked off before that. I the same opinion. You're talking about warrior culture and bring the warrior culture back. Okay, but do you actually have a plan, or is that just is that just what you're saying to get us on board with your plan? Because now I'm in my 40s. I've seen enough election cycles now to be like, I don't know if I trust you.
Well, back when Ralph Klein was elected here in Alberta, and I remember, so he gets elected and he immediately starts implementing everything he said he was going to do. And the complaining and the pushback, like people were furious that he was doing. And I said, this is what he said he was going to do. But politicians never tell the truth.
We didn't really think he was going to do that.
We didn't think he was going to do that. Surprise! So I think you'll see that happen in the U.S., where they've said they're going to do all this. So let's see, and that's going to influence Canada as well, right?
Well, and we've already seen just tweets have completely destroyed and collapsed our government. Essentially, like tweets have dissolved our government.
Yeah.
That I never thought I would see, but it's what happened. It's if you look at it like big picture, a few tweets from Donald Trump has essentially completely thrown the Canadian government in disarray.
You know what? And it's got Canadians talking about what kind of Canada we want to live in.
100%.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. It's a long overdue conversation.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So, Catherine, I know you got a Christmas party to get into, so I don't want to keep you from that. But it's been a really great 2024 in terms of making sure Canadians and those in the Canadian Armed Forces and the veterans are informed as to what's going on with their charter rights, with their legal rights, with what's going on with these lawsuits that bring up open up a whole can of worms that we don't get to see in mainstream media. So I appreciate you for always having the time to come and chat on the show, and for everybody that's subscribed and followed and liked. It's been a wild ride. I never thought I'd be a quote unquote YouTuber, but apparently that's what I'm doing now, and that's really thanks to you, Catherine. So thanks so much for being a valued guest here on the podcast, and we'll definitely be discussing more in 2025. I can't wait.
Absolutely. Have a great Christmas season to you and your listeners, and away we go into 2025.
There we go.
See how many bottles of champagne we can pop.
Yeah, absolutely. So, folks, thanks again for tuning in, and have a great Christmas season, and train hard, fight easy. See you in 2025. Peace.